Well, hello and welcome to my fireside chat on the 12 associated clinical signs of the pathology in the family courts. We're up to ACS 5, the unforgivable event. And this is a highly characteristic symptom feature of the pathology. You're going to run into this almost all the time. And in the research, uh, the 46 Greenham Children's Pruder up on ResearchGate, 46 of the 46 families involved in court involved custody conflict had the three diagnostic indicators of the pathogenic parenting that I describe in Foundations. 46 of the 46 families also had five or more of the associated clinical signs, with all but one having eight or more of the associated clinical signs. So everything I talk about and describe in Foundations and relative to this pathology is 100% true and correct. Scientific method is to develop an explanatory model that makes predictions. I developed an explanatory model that makes predictions, and the predictions show up in the data. So the model that made the predictions is 100% accurate. In the data, the unforgivable event, ACS5, showed up in 96% of the families. Pretty much all the families had this symptom feature. And what it is that the child uses some unforgivable past event to justify all current and future rejection of a parent. And where this comes from is that there's no authentic reason for the child's rejection of the parent, that it's a false, a factitious, artificially created attachment pathology. However, the child needs a reason to be telling other people, why are you rejecting the targeted parent, child? They have to come up with reason, but there is no authentic reason. So they, in collaboration with the pathological parent, the child and the allied parent co-create this reason about the child's prior victimization, and develop this, in this manipulative, supportive dialogue of events of concern or grievances that are elicited from the child. And then once the event or the unforgivable event has been created, then the child can use that for all future rejection and supported by the pathological parent. So the way the pathological parent creates this false belief in victimization is they don't badmouth the other parent. That's not how it's done. And so people who think that's how it's done is just showing their kind of ignorance on the level of manipulation involved. What the pathological parent does is when the child comes home, let's say from visitation with the normal range targeted parent, the pathological parent will get very fluttery and anxious and say, were you okay? Everything okay? And they'll start to ask questions about the child's safety. Was the child okay? Because they're filling that protective parent role. So they want to be seen as the protective parent. And in filling that protective parent role, they're subtly communicating that there's something to be protected about. And so it's a whole manipulation thing when they come with this reassurance, supposedly. It's called a retrieval behavior, is a technical term for the attachment. It signals there's a predator danger. When the parent pulls a kid close, the kid goes, "What? You saw a predator?" And this is that type of behavior. Were you safe? Were you okay? Was everything okay? If the child says, "Yeah, everything's fine," the pathological parent will go dark mood. They'll go dark. They become grumpy. And if the child gives them a criticism, then they get very animated and excitement and provide all this nurture and warmth and affection. The child quickly learns if I don't give them a criticism, it's going to get uncomfortable in this house. If I do give them a criticism, oh, I get all this warmth and good stuff. So, stimulus response, they shape the child's behavior in coming back to offering up criticisms of the other parent. Then, when the child offers that criticism, the allied parent provides all this nurture. Oh, you poor thing. Oh, and reinforcing for the child this idea that the child's been victimized. And so once they get the child believing that they're being victimized, that they're being malevolently treated in some way. This is the creation of the persecutory delusion. The child's not being victimized. The child's, there is not being malevolently treated. But this parent creates that belief, manipulates that belief in the child. The moment the child believes, that they're being malevolently treated in some way, one thing that does is the child's attachment system is motivated to bond to a predator. So if I've got one parent signaling that there's a predator in the world, the child's going to say close to that parent, "Oh my goodness, there's a predator out there." Where? And they say, "That person." And the guy goes, "That person's a predator? I thought that was my mom. I was my dad." "No, they're mean to you. They're cruel." "Oh, really? And you need to protect me from that parent?" And so they create all this situation. And they create some unforgivable event. There was some conflict. Sometimes it's even like spousal conflict, that you had mom arrested, that night 5 years ago. And that's the unforgivable event that I can't get over. And that's why I'm rejecting you 5 years later, is because what you did to mom. You'll hear this, what you did to mom, a lot of times as the unforgivable event, because that's coming in from mom. She's the one that's creating the child's thoughts and beliefs. So once you recognize that, you can see the parents' thoughts and beliefs being expressed by the child. Um, and one of the prominent features about this ACS 5, the unforgivable event, is it represents a symptom feature called splitting. It's associated with narcissistic and borderline personalities, a very characteristic symptom. It's an extreme perception of all good or all bad. And so it's polarization of perception with no middle, extremes with no middle. That's splitting. And one of the other features of the splitting pathology, and it's neurological, it has to do with trauma. One of the other features of the splitting pathology is it's very rigid in its block. People who have middle, people who have gray, can kind of be flexible about things. But people who operate in this black or white extreme way of thinking get very rigid in their beliefs. And Marshall Linehan, top expert in personality pathology, describes this feature of splitting, this cognitive inflexibility. It is not uncommon for such individuals to believe that the smallest fault makes it impossible for that person to be good inside. Things once defined do not change. Once a person is flawed, for instance, that person will remain flawed forever. And one of the ways you see this just flamboyantly displayed is when the child uses this unforgivable event, and you say, "Well, we'll put it into that," and no, they'll never change. This will never change. And the child will say that. They're locked into a situation that will never change in their mind. And so they just lock out any sort of therapeutic efforts, everything, and they get locked into this polarized perception. Now, again, does the child have splitting as within them? No. The child is not acquiring this major psychiatric symptom from their experience. It's the allied parent who has the personality pathology, narcissistic borderline personality, that is characterized by splitting as a symptom, prominent symptom, and they are psychologically influencing and controlling the child. And so the belief system of the pathological parent is getting imprinted on the child's belief system through the psychological control. And one of the places we'll see that is splitting. The other place you'll see splitting is lied parents all wonderful, the targeted parents all awful. And then the unforgivable event. Once something happened, then it makes it impossible for that person to ever be good again. Now, the truth on this relationship kinds of stuff and things, it goes back to stimulus response. B.F. Skinner, operant conditioning, stimulus response, that we don't respond to things that happened in the past. We respond to the current setting and environment, stimulus response. The only time we respond maybe to something in the past is when there's been PTSD, when there's been some sort of trauma that intrudes into our current situation. But that's not responding to the past. That's the past intruding in PTSD symptoms. And if you look behind the PTSD symptoms, you see death, serious injury, or sexual violence. That's the only thing that causes PTSD symptoms. If you get less severe past distortions, which most of us have, if you get less severe, they show up like this. They show up as ripples of how we perceive things. They don't show up dominating what we do. But this pathology is mimicking a PTSD thing. So it's a false attachment pathology. And so as you begin to pick it apart, you can begin to pick apart where it's simply a false pathology, that there's no there there. The child's not responding. It's called stimulus control. The child's not responding to the stimulus of the targeted parent. In fact, that's irrelevant what the targeted parent does. The child's continuing to do the same thing, the same lockstep, you know, control, psychological control, splitting, and pathology, expressing the pathology of the pathological parent. So let's move over to ACS 6 now and discuss